There are three things you can do to help us out.
1, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
2 is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And 3, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic, and this time we're delighted to be joined by, I suppose, a man we have to call a storyteller, even though the storytelling might be via the radio, might be via podcasts, might be via books, might be via journalism. It doesn't matter which way it comes to you. It comes from Jon Ronson. Hello, John.
Hey,
Good to see
David, and hello, Mark. It's
Very
funny,
nice to see you.
when I was growing up, the word storyteller was so associated with, I don't know, a Norfolk hippie taking opium and then banging a drum next to a fire. I never thought of myself in those terms, but now I think
Now it's a compliment.
yeah.
It's absolutely. Everybody talks about we have our stories to tell, TV networks, film networks, whatever. They're all in the story business. Now, we catch up with you in upstate New York because you relocated to New York. How many years ago now?
10 years ago this year.
Right.
It was a decade ago for no good reason.
I was going to say, why did you move?
No particular reason. Everything was going fine in London. In fact, better than fine. My life in London was great, and we just moved. I think.
Do you regret it?
For the first year, I regretted it very much, and now I don't regret it at all.
Right.
You get used to your new circumstances. We moved, in the words of President Kennedy, with the moon landing. Sometimes you should do things because they're hard. And that was partly to do with it. My son was in a school that he didn't love. We were in a part of London that everybody loved more than we did, at Highgate Village, which is beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Absolutely gorgeous. But at that moment in our lives, it's quite a cut-off place. Like the public transport isn't great. You're at the top of a hill. So if you're coming back from town, you're like at the top of like London's steepest hill. We felt a little bit isolated.
Yes, you are.
Yes, it's true. That is true, yeah.
And it felt a little bit older than we were at the time. Like it felt like a place for somebody to retire. So for all of those reasons, we thought, well, okay, let's move. And then we just got to talking, well, why don't we, our whole lives we've just moved from one bit of London to the other. Why don't we move to New York?
Do
So
people
it's
have to
10
bring
years,
you
10 years
Marmite and things when they come out and visit?
Well, actually, Marmite is incredibly easy to get to the extent that my little village in the middle of upstate New York, the grocery store up the road sells Marmite. Not just because I'm here.
Not just for the expatriates, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no point traveling anymore, is there? If you can get Marmite everywhere, there's no strange new world, is there, out there? Anyway,
Marmite was one of my worries. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go.
So, yes.
We traditionally start these chats by asking people if they can remember what record playing equipment was in their home when they were a child, or what might have been playing on it.
Oh yeah, I have a clear memory in our dining room in Cardiff of one of those record players with the 33 and the 45 and the 78, and the very first song I remember playing on that record player very clearly was the Court of King Caractacus by I think Rolf Harris. I do believe.
Yes, probably
It might have been. That's a brilliant record, actually. It has to be said. What a tongue twister.
Right, yeah. I remember.
Did you learn the words and join in?
That was the whole point of the exercise.
Yeah.
So we were all marching around the dining room table, singing along to the Court of King Caractacus. Was it Rolf Harris? I think it was. Did you know?
It probably was, yeah. And if it was, it would be produced by George Martin as well, wouldn't it?
Really?
Because George Martin did all those records.
Oh, wow.
George Martin did all the great EMI comedy records of you're younger than Mark and I, but we grew up with Bernard Cribbins.
Yeah,
and,
Peter Ustinov,
that was all
didn't he?
George Martin.
That's right.
Peter Sellers. Yeah.
Right.
So were you into comedy records? Were you into comedy records?
I was. My grandfather, who lived in Cardiff, who was a very severe man, who ended up losing all of his money in casinos. I've got a clear memory of us going round there, and it was rare because they didn't have a good relationship with my parents. But I remember going round there and listening to Woody Allen's comedy albums, the Moose sketch.
The Moose.
Yeah, do you remember the Moose? The guy?
I do. I haven't heard it for years, but yeah, I was reminded of it. I read his autobiography recently. The Moose sketch was a big breakthrough for Woody Allen, wasn't it?
Yeah, I have such a memory of sitting there just killing myself laughing as this Moose story unfolds. The story is that there's a guy, he's in the countryside, he runs over a moose, and now there's like a dead moose, and somehow he ends up going to a costume party pretending that the moose is him in costume. Is that right? I can't.
It's so long since I've heard it, but it makes me laugh just to think about it. It's a long time ago.
So comedy albums, yeah. The other big musical influence at the time was my Auntie Mavis. I came from a very non-show business family. My dad was a wholesaler. My mother was a social worker. My grandfather was a milliner. The one who lived in London. And my father's sister was the only person in our family who had any connection to show business.
The only groover.
Yes. And she, in fact, now might be a good time to show you a photograph I've got of her.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, go on.
Yeah.
Right here on the wall. Whoops.
Oh,
how on earth did that come about?
Oh my goodness!
That's very impressive.
I know, right?
So,
how did she engineer that?
So, who is she? Give us a complete title. Give us a complete name from the left. There,
her name was Mavis Ronson, and she's next to Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, Charlie Watts, Brian Jones.
So how did she manage to do that? Because I can remember you writing something about her once and saying that she'd photographed the Stones.
Yeah.
When she was, so how on earth did that happen?
So when she was 19 or so, she did what no one did, especially no sort of middle-class Jewish girl from London. She went around the world, and she ended up getting shipwrecked with opium smugglers, and she met the Dalai Lama and met ended up having these like incredible adventures for a couple of years, and she wrote a well-received book about it. You know, she ended up like in the trenches as bullets were flying overhead, like all sorts of things. And so she photographed it all and brought out this book with photographs called We Never Meant to Go So Far, and got back to Britain after a couple of years and briefly became a little bit of a sensation. And she segued that into doing music photography. So, you know, she ended up photographing the Rolling Stones and
who was she photographing them for? Was it for a magazine or something? Or
I don't know, to be honest. When you Google her, there's a couple of her photographs on Magnum, some of her travel photographs on Magnum, and I'm not sure what the other stuff was. What I was told was that photograph of my Aunt Mavis with the Rolling Stones was taken in my grandparents' kitchen in Portman Square in London, right next to Selfridges, for a series of photographs called Rock Stars in the Kitchen.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Of course, not their kitchen.
No, my Auntie Mavis.
Which is the whole point of it, really.
The lovely idea of my Auntie Mavis with the Rolling Stones. That's just brilliant. And it's a really good picture as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
brilliant.
I mean, of course, she didn't take that one, of course, because she's in it. But
no.
Yeah, but it's still a good picture. Brian Jones, I have to say, really looks like he doesn't want to fucking be there.
No.
Yeah, well, there you go.
As he did in quite
There's always one.
Yeah.
There's always one member of a band.
Did she give you records then? Did she introduce you to stuff?
Well, yes. So when I was about 3 or 4, she would send cassettes. We were in Cardiff, she was in London, and she would mail cassettes. And I have such a clear memory of her mailing a cassette with 2 songs on it, Life on Mars and Black Betty by Ram Jam.
Both, but that's a great. Oh, Blackberry Ramble. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Life on Mars. So you would have been how old? About 10 when this?
No. I would have been 5.
5.
Yeah, I was born in 67, and Life on Mars came out in 72.
All right.
Yeah, that's right.
71.
Oh
My God! But that's a complicated song.
Oh,
on America's tortured brow, the mice and their million hordes and all that, isn't there?
Yeah, but I was just hearing Mickey Mouse.
Yeah,
cows.
That's right. Yeah.
So for me, it was no different to the Court of King Caractacus.
Yeah.
She died, unfortunately. My aunt died in 1977, so it was short lived.
Yeah.
But for those years, she was certainly the kind of beacon of there is a life outside the life that Ronsons usually live.
Right. So what did your mum and dad like music? Did they play a lot of music in the home? Or?
Nah, my father would listen to Perry Como. He was a big Perry Como fan. So that was like his kind of thing. No, there was a bit of hostility. I always remember playing, because this is much more to do with the fact that he was just grumpy at times. But I remember I got massively into the Beatles when I was young, and I remember playing him Honey Pie, thinking, well, he's going to like this because he likes Perry Como. And he was like, turn this rubbish off. Yeah. And I was thinking, it's fucking Honey Pie.
Yeah.
No one can think that this is like just a noise. But he did.
He did. So what was your first personal musical enthusiasm? And can you remember did you go to record shops regularly? Can you remember what shops you went to?
Mm-hmm. There was a very famous, beloved independent record store in Cardiff. Spillers Records, yeah. So I'd go there. And the first record I ever bought, I remember clearly, was Cool for Cats by Squeeze.
Oh, right.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So I would have been about 11 or 12 then, I think.
Right.
I also bought Into the City by the Skids that same journey. They were both...
Oh, Into the Valley.
Into the Valley.
These are great. Again, these are great storytelling songs, aren't they?
But I mainly
The Indians send signals from the rocks above the pass. What a brilliant opening line.
Brilliant. I would have chosen both of those records for the fact that they were both coloured vinyl. Cool for Cats was pink, and Into the Valley had a weird, almost, I don't know, looked like a stew.
Yeah.
It did. So Spillers claims to be the oldest record shop in the world, doesn't it? It certainly used to.
Right. Well, it was certainly going when I was a kid. I can tell you that.
It's still going now. I was in Cardiff 7 or 8 years ago, and I thought I'm going to go and see this place, and it was there in an arcade. But I think they probably had more than one branch.
There was a scare, wasn't there? That it was going to be closed. There was a campaign. Like but I think it's meant to be the oldest record shop in the world.
Right. Well, it was terrific. It wasn't in the arcade where it is now when I was growing up. It was on St Mary Street, right, directly opposite where St David's Hall now is, which I remember being built. St David's Hall. I remember when I was 12 or 13 going in there and buying a Captain Beefheart album, and they were really impressed.
So which one did you buy? Can you remember?
I do. It was Lick My Decals Off, Baby, and Spotlight Kid, which I think probably had Ice Cream for Crow, probably.
Yeah. No, that's a separate one.
Is that later?
I think we had Ian McMillan on one of these podcasts recently. He was talking about, wasn't he, Dave, about sending his dad into a record shop to buy him Lick My Decals.
Yeah, and this is in Barnsley as well. So I'm sorry, you can't help thinking about the comic possibilities of a middle-aged Yorkshire gentleman going in a shop and saying, "Have you got Lick My Decals Off?" You know.
I know, right? What was your reaction to that age 13? That's incredibly that's precocious.
It was precocious. And I do remember thinking maybe this is a little too much for me at this tender age, and I'll try again in a few years' time. When I did discover Ice Cream for Crow, I was really pleased because finally there was a Captain Beefheart song that I could just like.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It finally came and met you halfway. Yeah. Somewhat late in his career.
Yes.
That's what he did. Wait, can you remember the first people you went to see?
Yeah. David Essex.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I was so. I just couldn't believe that an actual star would come to Cardiff. So in the run-up to go to see David Essex, I got it into my head that it won't actually be him. It will be some kind of hologram or a model or something.
You forget what a huge star he was, wasn't he?
God,
He was massive.
Yeah, huge. And I still...
Can you remember it?
Yeah, I remember going there. It was my first ever gig. So it was at Sophia Gardens, which ended up getting... it fell down in the snow. There was a big snow one year and it just collapsed. But I saw a lot of groups there. I saw the Specials there, and Genesis, Hawkwind.
Right.
So I saw a lot of good groups at Sophia Gardens before it closed down.
So you were not kind of you were all over the map in terms of your musical interests. Is that fair?
No, because I just would go and see whoever was playing.
Okay.
And in fact, the more heavy metal type groups would have been my brother's influence. Like I never was that interested. He was into like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that would be playing at the Young Farmers Club up the road, discos up the road. It was all like bum, bum, bum. But that was never my taste. And in fact, I was going to mention this to you guys. I believe that our musical tastes really don't change. I think the songs we loved when we were 10 are the songs we'll love today. I think, with some caveats, like I was never into Bruce Springsteen until now. So you do evolve in some ways. But for instance, I think if I heard Cool for Cats and Into the Valley right now, I would like Cool for Cats just as much as I did when I was 10, and I would dislike Into the Valley, or be as indifferent to Into the Valley as I was when I was 10.
I think that's probably true. It's we often say it's a particular difficulty with young men, with boys, that we developed this theory over years working in offices where music played with male and female colleagues. Is that women would go, oh, I like this. What is it? Men would go the other way around. What is it? And then they'd tell you whether they liked it or not.
Right.
And so they didn't want to be exposed by saying that they liked something that they subsequently discovered was ludicrously unfashionable. Because women didn't care. They just this is a really good song.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
Whereas men, I think, traditionally use music as a way of positioning themselves. So you got what they genuinely like, and then you've got what they'd like to admit to liking, or what they think is the kind of thing that a person like them ought to like. I don't know.
I got you. But I wonder how much our tastes change. When I hear a song. Lately, I've been listening, partly to do with you guys. You've had a big influence on me. I learned so much from watching the OK Whistle Test and from reading Word and so on, and especially things like pub rock, like these slightly more difficult genres to find. That these sort of weird hints, like the pre-punk bands.
Right.
So I will go, I'll be running on my running machine back there, and this Dr. Feelgood on the Old Grey Whistle Test would come up, introduced by you, and then that would take me down a rabbit hole to other pub rock stuff, and so a lot of it came from you two.
Oh, well, at least it's all there to find nowadays, isn't it? Whereas for years it wasn't. When records disappeared, they disappeared. Nothing disappears anymore at all.
So has there never been anything that you really, really loved when you were young that you've subsequently come to hate, or have your feelings always remained the same?
No, I think my feelings have remained surprisingly constant over the years.
Yeah.
I've grown to like some things more than I did when I was younger. So I had no interest in soul music when I was younger, and I'm getting much more into that.
Yeah.
As I say, Bruce Springsteen, who I now just adore, I had no interest in when I was a kid. So there are like, I'd say my tastes have burgeoned, but I find a song that I loved when I was 6 that I wouldn't love now, and vice versa.
I think.
Yeah, even I'll give you one example. It's such a forgotten song, but I was watching Licorice Pizza the other day, and "Stumbling In" by Suzi Quatro came on, and that's a song I loved when I was a kid, and I loved it just as much now.
God, I don't know that. Was that a hit?
I don't know though.
It was when Suzi Quatro went a bit country, and she.
I missed that moment.
Oh, I totally missed that.
It was a duet with a
so
guy.
Was there a fringe jacket and white boots or something? I mean,
well, it was a duet with a man whose name I forgot. Possibly Chris something. Our love is alive, and so it begins. Foolishly laying our hearts on the table, stumbling in. So it had a kind of country twang to it.
It's so extraordinary. I've seen the trailer the ad for Licorice Pizza hundreds of times because it keeps getting shown online or whatever. And all that trailer is life on Mars.
Right.
It's the opening chord. It's Rick Wakeman, frankly, is what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
And suddenly, I'm back there because I'm old enough to have been there. But, 24-year-olds today still go, life on Mars. Right. Doesn't it take you back? Even though they weren't there back then. It's an extraordinary thing. It was such a powerful statement. So what about your performing history? Because you've had times playing with bands, haven't you? Tell us about this.
Yeah, so when I was a student, when I was a kid, I played in bands, like school bands, all of which pretty much were inspired by Terry Hall. Terry Hall was all of our god back then.
What were you, the keyboard player, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was a keyboard player.
And were you the singer too, or?
No, there was this kid called Dylan Clark, whose mother was a famous poet, Gillian Clark. He was one of the very few, I'm trying to think of the best word, the very few sort of kind of mysterious, exotic people at Cardiff High School, because he lived in a sort of fancy, old, nice house, and his mother was a poet. He was a bohemian, and there weren't many bohemians at Cardiff High, I'll tell you that.
No. And he based his stage act then on Terry Hall, would that be right?
Yeah.
So just basically just standing there, being completely curmudgeonly and scowling and.
Right, but also the type of song, like the Colour Field or that Fun Boy 3, that sort of music. But then I moved to Manchester. Sorry, I moved to London and eventually became the social secretary at the Polytechnic of Central London.
Oh right.
Yeah, and that's how I.
And you were booking the bands.
Mm.
Oh, who? Did you
that's power. That's power. Was that
incredible?
Fun?
Most of the people who did that went on to run agencies or record companies. It's interesting.
Yeah, most of them did. Yeah,
nearly all did.
My predecessor was a guy called Paul Buck, and he ended up being a music agent like his whole life. So you're right, that's what most. But my
who did you book? Come on, and how much more?
I booked comedy better than music. My big contribution was the show that I did on a Tuesday nights at the Poly Bar, called Frank's Wild Tuesdays. And
Frank's Wild Tuesdays?
Yeah, that's what I called
it's a little Tom Waits reference.
I was a huge Tom Waits fan. Right back to when I was a teenager in Cardiff. And so the comedians that I booked were... Like if you saw the list of comedians, it was like incredible. It was like everyone. I've said this to them, to Vic and Bob, and they say it's not true. But I would place money on the fact that I booked Vic before he was a double act with Bob. That's how sort of early it was. But both Vic and Bob have said to me subsequently that can't have happened because Vic never did any live shows without Bob outside of the club that he was based in. But I contend that I did book Vic.
Fair enough. We believe you.
Yeah, who else? That's amazing.
Music-wise, I suppose the most. So my comedy booking talents were certainly higher than my music booking talents, but for the Freshers' Fair, I booked Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers.
Oh, wow. Amazing! That's amazing.
Yeah, just before it was just when this great album of theirs, which is one of his least known albums, called Rocking and Romance. Do you know that one?
No, I don't know that one. He's made a lot of records. Anyway, go on.
It's one of the ones that's just, I think you can listen to it pirated on YouTube. It remains one of my favourite of his records. So that had just come out, and they wanted quite a lot of money, and they were saying, my colleagues were saying, nobody's going to go and see Jonathan Richman.
So what year are we talking about here?
87.
Okay.
Well, yes, that's a while.
He's not the hottest item in 87, is it? But anyway,
10
go
years
on.
after his big hit. That's right.
Well, you're bringing me back to the conversations I had at the time. Somebody would have said it's 1987. He's not the hottest. No. And I would have said, no.
If that's 120 quid.
Well, I would have said, no. If I love Rocking and Romance as much as I do, then there's going to be a whole lot of people out there who feel the same way. And sure enough, it was a triumph.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. God. Well,
fantastic.
Very good. And who did he turn up with? Did he have a band?
Yeah, he had two guys. Thank God, because it's kind of a swizz when he turned up to see Jonathan Richman. It's just him on stage.
Did you think so?
Yeah, he'll be doing that for tax reasons, I'm sure. And so it was two guys whose names I've forgotten, but they were the same two people who recorded Rocking Romance with him, and probably Jonathan Singh. So that was the album I'd be before after. Right. So that Summer Feeling. And they were so tight, like they were great, and everyone loved them. But I always remember the bouncer when he sang Affection. I always remember the bouncer. You always want to look at the bouncers, right, when you're at gigs, to see whether are they getting into it. And I remember the bouncer was just grinning from ear to ear, listening to Jonathan.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we were only talking about it the other day because we thought, let's see if we can get Jonathan Richman to do one of these things. He's got a record to promote or whatever.
I sent an email.
Mark got in touch with his PR.
It was just hilarious that I got this almost immediately an email back, which I thought, this is really enthusiastic. And it said, Jonathan doesn't have a computer or a mobile telephone and is never on social media, and I feel it'd be highly unlikely he'll be able to do this.
Very nice.
So in a way, I kind of loved him more for it. Really,
he's so great.
That, it just is absolutely impossible for him to get on the other end of a Zoom because he's Jonathan Richman. He lives, he's dropped through a wormhole in time.
Yeah. Someone told me once that he was in a car with Jonathan Richman. I think he was a promoter, and he was taking Jonathan Richman to a gig, and they stopped at traffic lights, and Jonathan Richman jumped out of the car and did press-ups on the side of the road.
Yeah. He would do. He would. Yeah. I've worked with Jonathan Richman. It would not surprise me at all.
Right.
And it's, and I do think that the world has caught up with Jonathan Richman more than the other way round. Now, I worked with him in 76, 77. And it's like, look, we're going out for dinner with Jonathan Richman, and we're going to, get this, a vegetarian restaurant. And when somebody said that to you in 1977, you thought, wow, weird is that?
So funny. How did you work with him?
I worked at Berserkly Records.
Did you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, when, when he had hits with
Roadrunner. And I can remember you offered to pick him up from Heathrow, and he said no, he was going to...
He ran from Heathrow.
He ran all the way from Heathrow to the Berserkly offices.
Kingston on Thames.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's genuinely an absolute one-off, And
he's amazing. He's found a whole new audience because of his brilliant appearance in Todd Haynes' documentary about Velvet Underground.
Yeah, which I've not seen. Apparently, he's very good.
He's the star. He's like the standout star.
Really? Yeah. So, tell us about your further musical experiences. Because go on, carry on.
Okay, so who else? So I booked. Yeah, okay. So I was at college, putting on the shows, and two things happened at the same time. People started telling me about this guy Frank Sidebottom. Actually,
we were going to ask you about this because tell the story, because you finished up with his band, didn't you?
Yeah. So what happened was, before I became social secretary, I was shadowing my predecessor, Paul Buck, and And I saw this band called the Man from Del Monte sound checking. They were supporting whoever was headlining. And I just thought the Man from Del Monte were the greatest band I'd ever heard. So I went up to them and I just, enthused. And at the same time, Frank Sidebottom was playing. And we went to try and see what he was like, what he looked like without his head on. So we were like sneaking backstage to try and spot Frank Sidebottom without the head. And I got friendly with them too. And then I booked Frank Sidebottom, and the manager phoned me up and said, I think we're going to need to cancel. Our keyboard player's in some terrible difficulty. I don't think we're going to make the show unless you know any keyboard players. And I said, I play keyboards. And he said, well, you're in. And I said, I don't know any of your songs. And he said, can you play C, F, and G? And I went, yeah. And he said, well, you're in. Yeah, that's how
You're overqualified.
So I moved to Manchester after my year's tenure was up as social secretary. Instead of completing my college course, I moved to Manchester to become Frank Sidebottom's keyboard player and the Man from Del Monte's manager.
And Frank Sidebottom, I mean, genuinely, he was, in fact, was Chris Seavey, am I right? The guy who used to be in the Freshies. But I mean, the impression I got is he used to keep the giant papier-maché head on for long periods of time when he wasn't actually on stage. I mean, in the van and things. So people said he used to, isn't that right?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
If we were turning up somewhere like Newcastle and at 3:00 in the afternoon, there'd be a record signing at a record store, like meet the fans at a record store. And then the sound check was at 5 and then the gig was at 8. On occasions like that, he would carry on being Frank. And even between the engagements. And if you called him Chris, he wouldn't answer. No, just his blank look on his blank face.
I'd say both Mark and I have only got probably one good picture of us doing the whistle test, which is taken on the set of the whistle test during a kind of rock around the clock, I think. It's a really good picture. It's got me and Mark, it's got Andy Kershaw, it's got Rowan Newton, it's got Richard Skinner. And I occasionally show it to the kids, your dad used to be on the television, whatever. And they kind of look at it and they go, who's that bloke? And of course,
I've got it on my phone.
It's got
I've actually got it on my phone. Is that visible?
It's a little too blurry, I'm afraid.
No, it's amazing.
But it's just amazing. He was so regularly on whistle test that after a while you didn't even notice him. You just thought, oh, it's Frank Sidebottom.
That's so
we're in the head for days at a time.
Well, I tell you what, though, at 2:00 in the morning, driving up the M6 after a gig, I turn around and, he's still got the head on. He's decided to keep the head on. And what a magical thing. Like, nothing makes a 19-year-old boy more excited than driving up the M6 at 2 in the morning next to a man wearing a big fake head.
You ended up on the radio up there, didn't you?
What happened was, so everything fell apart with the bands. Frank fired me for tax reasons and ended up going alone. So I was out of a job. This was after a few years. He just couldn't afford to pay the band anymore. And the Man from Del Monte fired me at the same time. Probably for good reason. I contend that the Man from Del Monte would have been a much more successful band had they had a better manager than me. I just didn't know how to do it. But so I was lost. I was in Manchester without any work, didn't know what to do. I was a little heartbroken. And who came to my rescue completely unexpectedly, because I didn't even know him well, was Terry Christian. He was presenting a show.
He was presenting The Word, wasn't he?
This was actually before The Word.
Before The Word.
Yeah, he was presenting a show on KFM in Manchester, in Stockport, and asked me to be like his sidekick so he could, make fun of me on the air.
Did he actually use the expression, I'd like you to be my sidekick?
It was certainly along those lines. But so I turned up at this radio station and the co-presenters in the evening, it was Terry, Craig Cash and Caroline Aherne. And I joined the team, 4 of us.
You had fun.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun, but turning up late at night and broadcasting into the night. So we had
that couldn't last, could it? Really?
No,
it never does in radio.
we all got fired one by one on the same day. The new program controller considerately rubbed my back while firing me.
And what was the reason for your being fired? Just commercial reasons, or editorial reasons? Yeah, commercial reasons. They just thought KFM had a remit that we had to play a certain percentage of Manchester songs, and as a consequence, that really impacted the whole thing in the evenings. Anyway, in the day it was very mainstream showbiz, splashy and nicey, and then in the evenings with me, Craig, Caroline and Terry, we became like a sort of indie punk alternative station. So we'd play a lot of the emerging Manchester music, obviously the Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, but then the other music would be the Pixies or the Violent Femmes. So we were never going to... So then a new program controller came in and just fired a lot of them.
That's basically what program controllers do. That's how they manage radio stations.
Yeah, exactly. But what a great time that was.
I wanted to ask you about as you can see, I'm a hoarder of stuff here, and I wanted to know whether you're a hoarder, and I'm particularly in the light of your experience in the wonderful film you made years ago about Stanley Kubrick's boxes. Tell people, for the benefit of anybody who hasn't seen it, this is just the most extraordinary piece of work. Tell us about Stanley Kubrick's boxes.
Okay, so right when I was starting out in the mid-90s, I made this documentary called Hotel Auschwitz, which was a Radio 4 documentary about the marketing of the concentration camp. Very first thing I really ever had broadcast, and the BBC did that thing that the BBC does, which is like a personal journey.
Yes,
which is basically their way of saying,
how can we distance ourselves from this? Not the company view. He's out on his own.
So shortly after it aired, and it was good. It was the first proper story that I ever did, and it was good. And shortly after it aired, I got this phone call from this mysterious man called Tony saying, my employer would like a copy of your Auschwitz documentary. So I said, who's your employer? And he said, I'm afraid I can't tell you. Not at liberty to say.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so I said, go on. And he said, okay. He said, it's Stanley Kubrick. So I sent off the tape and nothing happened. And several years later, he died. And then a couple of years after that, he phoned again. Tony phoned again and said, do you want to come up to the house for lunch? And it was the Kubrick house. So I got the train to Harpenden, got picked up, and Stanley Kubrick's, giant sprawling mansion with stable blocks and so on. But it looked like the Inland Revenue had taken it over. It was just boxes and filing cabinets and dusty stuff. It was very utilitarian.
There were 1,000 boxes, weren't there? Isn't that right?
1,000 boxes.
All neatly labelled. So what kind of things did you find?
Oh, like everything. I said to them, so what's in the boxes? And Tony said, everything. We never threw anything away.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah. So in one box was the severed head of the sniper from Full Metal Jacket. And as I looked at it, Christiane Kubrick walked past, and I said, I've just found the severed head of the sniper from Full Metal Jacket. And Christiane was like, she was called back, but she wasn't beheaded, she was shot. And I said, I know. And then in another box, I found a crazy fan letter that somebody had written, Arthur C. Clarke, with all these this is what you meant by 2001, this is what you meant by 2001. And Arthur C. Clarke had sent the letter on to Kubrick and had handwritten, what a nut. Yeah. And so that was another thing. And just everything, everything you can imagine was there.
Because he just kept everything, didn't he? It was just, do you kind of understand that? Do you sympathise with that?
No, I'm not a hoarder. I like things. Well, he had a huge house, so his point was that I mean, Tony said that to me. Like, it's a huge house. We can do it. You can throw it away. You can shove it in a box and put it in a porta cabin and forget about it.
Right.
In one porta cabin was pretty much photographs of every mortuary in the southeast, every costume shop. I'm going to tell you this. I'll tell you my favourite find. It makes me laugh so much. So Kubrick got his nephew, Manuel Harlan, to photograph every inch of Commercial Road in East London. Yeah, every inch. So this is like Google Street View before Google Street View was invented.
It is.
So he had to take a ladder. So Manuel would turn up every day with a ladder and a camera, climb the ladder, take a photograph, move.
But then each photograph would only be about 6 foot of tarmac or something, wouldn't it? I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, and so at the end, he then had to like sellotape every photograph together to make this perfect panorama. So that's what he did. He went to Snappy Snaps. This lasted like, I don't know, a couple of months, maybe, or a month, because it was both sides of Commercial Road as well.
Yeah.
And it's not a short road. So Kubrick's like phoning up all the time, going, it must be nearly finished. When are you going to be finished? And so finally,
what did he want it for?
Well, let me tell you what. So because I don't think Manuel was entirely sure either. So Manuel goes to Snappy Snaps, gets the photographs developed, very neatly sellotapes them all together, so you've got a perfect panorama of the whole of Commercial Road, like lays it down along a long corridor inside Kubrick's house. Kubrick comes out of his private quarters, takes one look at this and says, well, it sure beats going there. He could have just gone there.
It's insane.
It's amazing. I went to you must have gone to that Kubrick exhibition that was at the Design Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Which was mind-boggling. That was it. He didn't make that many films, did he, really? He just spent so much time preparing them. Absolutely everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the people who ended up curating that exhibition were kind of hanging around at the same time that I was doing it.
Right.
But it became pretty obvious that they were only interested in like the big stuff. Like some very recognizable prop from A Clockwork Orange or whatever. And I was more interested in the more kind of obscure.
Well, it's a fantastic little film if you get the opportunity to see it.
It's been pirated on Vimeo, so that opportunity is there for all.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So you're about to visit back in Blighty, aren't you? To do some live shows in the wake of your most recent project, Things Fell Apart. Tell people about this in case they haven't heard it.
Yeah. So Things Fell Apart. It was a Radio 4 BBC Sounds podcast I made, stories from the history of the culture wars. So I just found these incredible human unfolding stories that all are linked because they're all origin stories in the history of the culture wars, like a decision somebody made in the early 1970s that doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything, which then suddenly, 30 years later, an abortion doctor is murdered. So it's these ripple stories. So I'm going to come to Britain. I'm doing just 8 shows. Most of them are sold out at the moment. Lagging notably behind is Sheffield. I think it's pretty much the only one that isn't close to selling out just yet.
Right.
Hopefully that'll happen. I'm just doing 8 or 9 shows, just telling stories from Things Fell Apart and showing some video clips.
That's so good. I was listening to one yesterday, the one of the Scottish Jewish joke, which is a brilliant idea. Just tell us about that, because it was about you discovering it's the first time anyone was kind of publicly shamed on the internet. It's almost before the internet was invented, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was this precursor to the internet, Usenet, and this was 1987. And some guy had a joke of the day that he would just his computer would automatically post a joke each day, and he posted this Jewish Scottish joke. Which I gotta say, wasn't so bad. It was just like a joke you'd see on Saturday night TV, and the upshot of which is Jews and Scots don't want to pay for dinner. That was like the meaning of the joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, this joke caused a furore, and at Stanford University, the creators of the internet, who were creating it at that very moment, these AI geniuses like John McCarthy, and then these business people like Peter Thiel, were all like debating, what do we do with this joke? Do we ban it or do we keep it up? And what they probably didn't realize, or maybe they did realize, was that the decision about what to do with this stupid joke would then impact. It would create a set of rules that every human being on the planet would live under for the decades since. Do we try and make the internet a civil place where we have a set of rules? Do we make it a draconianly censorship-y place where we ban offensive speech? Or do we make it a libertarian free speech utopia where any ideas, however dumb, any
people are going to get hurt in the process? So
yeah,
exactly.
So obviously that's what won. So an engineer's utopia of
so interesting. It's still kind of topical. It's still happening now, isn't it? Far more so. Actually.
Yes. You'll have to add a kind of an annex about the West Ham player mistreating the cat.
Oh yeah,
which is just I don't know how in touch with this you are, but this has gone crazy in Britain. How long it'll continue to rage, I do not know.
It's unbelievable. I mean, gosh.
So look, we traditionally finish these chats by asking people if they can tell us what is the greatest record ever made.
Oh,
something you have a view about?
Yeah, I think I do know what the greatest record ever made is.
Okay.
And I'm probably not the only person to think it. Does it have to be a single? Can it be an album?
It can be anything you like.
Single or an album.
It could be King Caractacus if you like. We don't care.
Look, my answer is going to be a little bit of a cliche, but sometimes cliches become cliches because they're an evident shining truth. I think the greatest record ever made is probably Born to Run.
Oh, wow.
I think it's a perfect.
Are we talking the single here, or are we talking the LP?
I mean, on the LP, I'd say there's 3 or 4 songs which are almost equally as good. Thunder Road, Born to Run, 10th Avenue. So maybe
Born to Run, the track is just exceptional, isn't it?
It's exceptional. It's so moving. It's so propelling. This is actually from Thunder Road, but it's a town full of losers
pulling out
of here to win.
Yeah. The thing that fascinates me about Born to Run, I think it is far and away his best record. That single, that track. And also what fascinates me is that the drummer who played, it's so much about the drummer, and he only ever played on one song. Ernest Boone Carter only ever played, because they took so long to make that record, he left by the time they finished it.
Wow, I didn't know that. I assumed that the East.
And if you believe, as I believe, that it's all about drummers, that is kind of living. I grab on that as living proof. It's all about drummers.
Right. I've been watching, I don't know if you've seen the 1979 legendary No Nukes concert that Springsteen.
Oh, I haven't seen. Well, I saw it years ago. Go on. I haven't seen the reissue. No.
Well, they've done a reissue of it, which is like much better. It's the entire concert. It's 90 minutes. They never released anywhere near this much before. And just honestly, I would so recommend. You can get it on Apple. It's 90 minutes. It's incredible period. I think what most people don't realize about Springsteen, and I didn't realize, is that there's almost no footage of him from the 1970s.
No, there isn't. There's that Rosalita, and
yes, and then there's the famous London show,
which for years you couldn't see at all. And I'll tell you why. Because I know why.
Okay.
Because Mike Appleton of the Whistle Test filmed it.
Right.
They wouldn't let them do anything with the lighting because he wanted it to be really dark, because he didn't want a thing that interfered with, atmosphere he was trying to set. They had low light cameras, were very hard in those days. I think they're a lot better nowadays. And so most of what they shot was invisible.
Right.
and the audio went back to the States.
So the two bits were never reunited until about 1986 or something like this.
Okay, and Springsteen wrongly thought it was a terrible show.
Yeah.
And also wrongly had the superstition that he didn't want to. I mean, I get it. He didn't want to see himself perform, so he didn't want anything recorded, which means that, that incredible decade, almost no footage of him. It's obviously in the 80s and beyond, like you can't move for Springsteen footage.
Well, except I remember the first time we shot him for Whistle Test. So what year was this? 85? When did 84?
85, I think. Yeah.
When did Born in the USA come out? 84, probably. 84. And we shot him at Philadelphia Spectrum, and they were only allowed to shoot 2 numbers.
Right.
And they had to be the singles. No.
So what were they? Born in the
Born
USA?
in the USA. I'll tell you what the other one was, Cover Me, which happened to be the next single or whatever.
Okay.
And then I was, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but John might be interested in this. They carried on filming without telling anybody who they were doing it during the Mitch Ryder medley at the end. But they had no sound. So when they were going to edit it, Mike said, I've got all this Mitch Ryder medley, but I've got no sound with it, So I said, well, he's recorded the Mitch Ryder medley on the soundtrack to No Nukes.
Right.
Is he really? Why don't you just go and get the sound? So he got the sound. No Nukes, matched it with the.
Did it sync up perfectly?
It sank, yeah.
How
what is the past tense of the verb to sink? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what they put together.
Wow.
I think we can say that now, after years. And that was on the kind of on the film that was shown on British television that kind of broke him.
Incredible.
Yes, but it's so true that he was incredibly self-conscious for years and years.
Yeah.
And years.
What made you connect with him then? Because you were saying earlier, it's really interesting. You're saying that you didn't really come see anything, and something just got you involved. So what was that?
I wonder what it was. Once in a while, it's been like blue cheese. That you hate it, and then you just one day you just love it. It's happened a few times in my life. You hear a song a million times. It happened to me with America by Simon and Garfunkel. It's a song you hear a million times, and then the 1,000,001st time you suddenly think it's the greatest song I've ever heard.
It is.
Yes.
And you didn't even notice all the other times you heard
That's
it.
That's why you should never go chasing music. You should let music chase you. Because music finds you. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what my kind of, what my gateway drug was for Springsteen, and I can't remember. But one minute, I just loved him. But going back to the 1979 No Nukes concert, so they've just reissued it with a whole load of footage that had never been shown before, and it's Springsteen at this incredible moment. He's not a hippie anymore. He doesn't have that big shaggy curly hair, and he's not yet sort of muscled.
No, he's not.
No, that's true. Swimming.
And what he and the E Street Band remind me most of is the Clash. Like, he's got a real kind of Joe Strummer vibe to him in '79, and Joe Strummer obviously was wants to be a musician because of Springsteen, and they're so working class. They're much more working class than you associate the E Street Band with. Clarence Clemens is just at one with his saxophone. Like, he plays the saxophone as he breathes, and Springsteen is he's unbelievable in this concert. And it's the first time. There's such a joy, isn't there, of hearing the first time an incredibly famous song is played to a live audience.
Yeah.
Like I've heard like Lou Reed go, here's a new song. I've never played it before. It's called Walk Up the Wild Side, and there's like a polite.
Yes.
Yeah, and the same thing happens in the No Nukes concert with The River. He's never played it before, and the audience is silent, and then there's the odd, like, somebody's letting off some noisy, one of those things. But by the second verse, I think you think people in the audience are thinking, Christ, this is a good song. But it's amazing to hear him sing The River for the first time, and those medleys he plays at the end, those rock and roll medleys he plays at the end.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I mean, anybody else in anybody else's hands, they'd just be cheesy. But But with him, it's
But
incredible.
I always think the thing about Springsteen is it's him with the band. That's the story. It's not him on his own. It's him with the band. Because here is this 6-stone weakling who turned himself into a superstar, and here's his mates.
Yeah,
That's the deal with Bruce Springsteen, you know. And I suppose, you know, No Nukes, that's it at its very peak, isn't it, really?
yeah.
Because they hadn't made it at that point, really, you know.
No, not really. They'd just done this massive tour where they like honed and honed and honed. And then they took, I think, a couple of months off to make The River. And then he did this concert. And they were so honed from all of this touring, and it's just perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. Have you seen that bit of footage of him? I think they're playing You Never Can Tell by Chuck Berry, where they're in a big stadium in Europe, and somebody holds it up on the cardboard, you know, as a request. Have you seen that one where he teaches the horn section, the riff? It's absolutely extraordinary. He just rehearses the whole band right in front of 60,000 people. And I don't think it's an act at all. I think they're such good musicians, they could just remember it and play it. And he teaches them the song and they just perform it live. It's phenomenal. Absolutely
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I live, my place, I actually live somewhere where I can see New Jersey out of my window.
All right.
Yeah. So, and there's always police lights. Like it's always, so I often sit there late at night on my mantelpiece, on my windowsill, looking out, wondering what all the crimes are, and hoping everyone's okay, and listening to Springsteen while I look over New Jersey. That's kind of how I spend my nights now.
Jon, it's been lovely talking to you.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.